Good morning or good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the InduSoft Web Studio webinar, Stump the Expert. My name is Fabio Terezinho, and I'll be the host of the webinar today. First of all, thank you very much for attending the webinar. And this is pretty much an open opportunity to ask whatever question you have about InduSoft Web Studio, about SCADA, HMI applications. And we'll do our best to answer your question in a timely manner and comprehensive way. You can use the WebEx bar on the top where you have the chat box or Q&A box and just write your questions there. And I'll be reading your questions and answering them when applicable, demonstrating how to implement whatever interface you have questions about. So please feel free to write your questions whenever you are ready, and I will hopefully be able to at least address each one of them individually. The first one here is I have a question regarding setting up InduSoft Web Studio with ISPs that assign dynamic IP addresses. Could you please run through the steps to allow web login with dynamic IPs? That's a common situation. In many cases, the IP addresses are dynamic, and the solution for that is pretty much to access the server through its name, through the DNS name, instead of using the IP address if the IP address is not fixed. So you could access the server using its name in a local area network. In InduSoft, you can even find the computer name using a built-in function called getComputerName. It returns the name of your computer. So for other thin clients in the local area network, instead of typing http:// and the IP address of the server, you can use the computer name of the server. So http:// the name of your computer and the path for the HTML pages, if any. So in this case, even if the IP address of this computer changes, as long as the name of the computer does not change, the WebThin clients will be able to access the computer. If the WebThin clients are linked to the server through external network, like for instance through the internet, then you need to have a domain name for a fixed one. That doesn't have to be a fixed IP, but the name needs to be constant. So the remote thin clients can reach your server through the domain name server, just like a website. For example, that's exactly how it works with the InduSoft demo running on the cloud. So if I go here to InduSoft.com, under Demos, Web Demos, if I click here in View Demo, you'll see here that the URL is http://demo.indusoft.com. This name here is actually being translated eventually to an IP address of our server. But this IP address can change, and we can still reach it through the domain name. And then I provide the username and password, and I have access to the application. So to sum up, if the IP address of the server is not fixed, if it is dynamic, the solution to reach the server from the thin clients is to use the name instead of the IP address to reach the server. So just one more question here. Sorry. Another question. how do we represent Omron PLC floating point numbers in InduSoft? It's possible in different ways. InduSoft Web Studio has two main drivers that support the Omron PLCs. If I come here to the list of drivers, one is called Omid, which is available to the wide market, but it supports FINS protocol only. And there is the Omron PLC, which supports all the Omron PLCs, all the protocols supported by the Omron PLCs, even the new NJs. So it supports FINS, it supports Ethernet IP, communication by tag name, communication by address, memory address. And this Omron driver is available only through Omron and through Omron distributors. The Omid driver, which is, let's say, the legacy driver, but it's available to the whole market, supports the syntax for address, which is area, format, address. For instance, if you want to read the data memory 10 as floating point, you can use F is the format for floating point 10. And here in the help manual for the driver, you see all the possible formats that the Omid driver supports. F for floating, but there are many others: BCD, double words, single double, string formats, and so on and so forth. But for format would be the data area, like D for data memory, F for floating point, in the address of the memory area. For the Omron driver, the syntax is slightly different, but also possible. So in the Omron driver, the syntax for the address is defined here. You pretty much define the memory area, the address. If it is a bit, then dot the bit number, and optionally data type. And the data type for floating point is either real or long real. So for instance, if you want to read data memory 10 as a real, you could use D10 real, and it would read this memory address as a floating point. If you communicate with a PLC like the NJ or CJ2 that supports tag names instead of memory address, if you just configure the driver worksheet to read a tag which happens to be a floating point in the PLC, we automatically read it as a floating point. You just have to assign a real tag on the InduSoft side to exchange data with that Omron tag, and you'll be able to read it as a floating point. Very well. By the way, just a quick note, here on the development environment, if you go to the Help tab and go to Communication Drivers, you can select any driver and click on Help to see the user manual for the driver with the syntax for the header, station, and address of any driver supported by InduSoft Web Studio. Another question here is, I would like to change PLC, InduSoft HMI to PLC, ActiveX Control, COM wrapper as abstraction API, InduSoft HMI. How does the HMI get updates when PLC tag value is changed? Callback methods or pooling? What if I have large PLC data structure to be displayed at HMI? Any performance consideration that I need to watch out for? So there are many questions in one here. First thing is InduSoft Web Studio has native drivers for more than 250 different protocols that you can use to exchange data with external devices, PLCs, motion controllers, robots, barcode readers, different types of devices. In addition to that, InduSoft Web Studio is an ActiveX container as well. So in any screen, in any graphical screens, you can go to Graphics, ActiveX Controls. It shows all the ActiveX controls available in your computer. You can pick any one. I'm going to change the background color of the screen since this ActiveX control is white, so we can see what it is a little bit better. So you can resize it here. This one happens to be the Microsoft Web Browser, but could be any other ActiveX control. And if you come here to configuration, you can link tags to any property of this ActiveX control, link tags to trigger the execution of any method from this ActiveX control, and select events and define scripts triggered by any event from this ActiveX control. And for properties and methods, you can even access those interfaces through scripts. You just give a name to the control, like NB, my browser. Then you create a script on the graphical interface, type the name of the control, dot, and you see all the properties and methods from the ActiveX control. For instance, navigate to www, let's say google.com. Run it, click here, you execute the method with the ActiveX control. So it's that simple to interface InduSoft Web Studio with the ActiveX control. The portion of the question to communicate with the PLC, if you have to do pooling or callback, it really depends on the protocol supported by your device. Some drivers support unsolicited message, so you do not have to keep pulling the device. For example, the Modbus slave driver, this one, supports unsolicited messages, so as the device itself can be a Modbus master and push data to the InduSoft driver. And in the driver worksheet, you can assign tags to specific addresses from the PLC, and when the values are received, the InduSoft tags receive the values. Other drivers like the Modbus or Modbus TCP and most of the other drivers, they implement protocols where InduSoft is the master. So InduSoft keeps pulling data from the remote devices. So it really depends on the protocol that the device you are using supports in the mode of this protocol, master or slave, that your device supports. Now, to link information from the PLC with the ActiveX control, if you want to do that, tags are the way to do that, because you can link tags to the ActiveX control directly here or through scripts, and you can link tags to the devices using a communication driver worksheet. So using those two interfaces, you can have common tags on the ActiveX control and on the driver worksheet, and share information having those common tags available to trigger interfaces on the ActiveX control and to exchange data with the PLC. Another question here. How do I make window-like technical reference help window in the development and call the window in the runtime? Not sure what means a window like the technical reference help, but let's assume that you want to create something like a tree view here on the left side, and depending on what you select on the tree view, you show something on the right side, right? So we have an example on how to do that in the standard PC demo, which is installed along with InduSoft Web Studio. If you come here to this button, Browse Screens, we have a tree view here with different options, and when you select an option and say Open, we open the particular screen with the option that you selected. In this case, the tree view is a pop-up and the actual screen is opened behind it. but you could easily modify this screen to have the tree view and the actual screen on the same frame, side by side, as a group of screens. And according to the selection from the user, just open a different screen on the right side, for example. This tree view control is an ActiveX created by InduSoft and installed with InduSoft Web Studio called InduTreeView. So you see here InduTreeView. So if you go to any screens, go to the list of ActiveX controls, you will find here the InduTreeView control, which is these elements right here. And like any other ActiveX control, if you click here on configuration, you can see the list of properties, methods, and events supported by this ActiveX control. And in order to populate this ActiveX control with the nodes, you pretty much use the method insert node. And when you call this method, you define the path for the node, the icon that you want to show on that node, which could be a ICO file, in a data, any kind of data that you want to associate with that icon. So when you click on the icon, the ActiveX control calls this event called cell changes and passes to you information in those properties here, passes to you the data, the label, in the path of the nodes that has been selected. So in this example, if you come here to the scripts of this screen, when I open this screen, I call this function build-tree-view, which I created here in this screen. And in this function, I call the object tree-view, which is the name I gave to the ActiveX control here. And then dot insert node. And for each node, I define here the path. For instance, the first one is the path root with the icon called home.ico. InduSoft automatically understands that the extension of the icon file is ICO. We just need to provide the icon name. The second node is the corporate node inside the root node with an icon called group. And if I go to the applications directory, on the web subfolder of the application, I have this folder here, tree view, and I have the icons root, screen, group. And before calling the insert nodes, I set this property of the ActiveX control called URL with the path where the icon files are. So pretty much, all I do here is call remove all to clean the tree view. I define if it is remote or not, or local, depending on if it is running on the webcam client or on the server. I set the URL with the path for the icons, and I just call insert nodes to insert nodes on the tree view. And during the runtime, when the function is called, all those nodes are created with the correct icons. And when I click on any icon, I can get, again, the name of the label of the icon selected, the path of the icon selected, and the data associated with the icon with those three properties. So here in the open button, I use those properties, selected data, tree view, selected data, for example, to open the screen according to the data that I associated with each one of those icons, which in this case is the name of the screen that should be opened. To sum up, using the tree view, the InduTreeView ActiveX control developed by InduSoft and installed with InduSoft Web Studio, you can create a screen similar to the technical reference interface. We would like a method to communicate to the PLC the users currently logged onto a screen. We have multiple secure viewers running, if one or more secure viewer users are logged into a particular process screen, then populate a server-based tags with those usernames. This is a very good question, a very common scenario as well. In the trick to create this interface is to use the feature in InduSoft Web Studio called scope for tags. So each tag in InduSoft has a scope that can be set to either local or server. Tags with the scope local have independent values in the server and on each thin client. Tags with the scope server share their values in the server and on each thin client. So the idea here is that on the server, you can create an array which has the username, the IP address, the status, any information you want for each one of the thin clients. So let's say, for example, an array called, let's create here, thin clients, for example. Okay? So let's say you want to know the IP, the computer name, the username, the status. Let's say we have here a heartbeat, something like that. Computer name has to be string, username has to be a string. Okay? Then we create a tag, which is called, for instance, thin client. From this class, thin clients. And let's say that I can have up to 10 thin clients, so let's create an array of 10 elements. And this tag must be a server tag. Now, the trick is to create another tag called, for instance, thin client ID, which happens to be a local tag. So this array will have the same value everywhere. The thin client ID will have an independent value on each thin client. And I believe I have in this application already one tag called isServer, which is a local tag as well. So in the startup script, I set this isServer to 1. Since the startup script runs on the server only, this tag will have the value 1 on the server and the value 0 on all the other thin clients because it's a local tag. So if I check the value of this tag during the runtime, if it is 1, it means that script is running on the server. If it is 0, it means this script is running on a thin client. But back to our tags here. So I have this class, which is a class for a server tag called thin clients. And this class has computer name, heartbeat, IP, status, username. Here in graphics script, which is a script that's executed every time I start the viewer, the graphical interface in each thin client. I can execute a logic. For instance, let's create a variable ID, and for ID equals to 1, 2, as big as the size of my array thin client, I want to check if the thin client index ID dot status is equal to 0, then it means this spot, let's put this way, is available. Then what happens here is I make the thin client ID, which is a local tag, equals to ID. Now, what I did here is when I start the viewer in a thin client, I look on this array for the first index where status is 0, So what I do is I make that particular status, which is a server tag, equal to 1. So the other thin clients, the next thin client that runs, will know that this status, this particular ID is taken. And I set here the thin client ID with the value of this ID. What I can do as well is thin client ID dot computer name is get computer name, which does not change. Thin client ID IP is get computer IP, and thin client ID username. Now the username is dynamic. So here on the while running, while the viewer is running, there are some more efficient ways to do it, but just to do quick, I can do here continuously thin client. Now the ID is no longer the variable ID, but the tag, the local tag, thin client ID. Thin client ID, which on this thin client will have the number of the ID associated with this client. Is equal to the tag username, which is another local tag as well. And thin client ID dot heartbeat. Oh, there is a typo here. Thin client ID dot heartbeat is equal to itself plus 1. Now this heartbeat is just to indicate to the server if this thin client is still live or not. So the server can reset the status of this client to 0 if the thin client is no longer live. So let's do this. Heartbeat keeps increasing. Let's do even easier way. Let's set the heartbeat to 0 here, right? So here in the server, what you can do is in the scheduler, for each one of those arrays, like thin client 1 dot heartbeat, you make this heartbeat equals to itself plus 1. And every time it changes, you check if the heartbeat is greater than a limit, let's say 10, it means that the thin client has not reset this ID in the last 10 seconds. Then you make the thin client 1 dot status, thin client 1 dot status equals to 0. In other words, the server keeps increasing the heartbeat, and the thin client associated to that ID keeps resetting it back to 0. If the thin client is shut down, then the thin client will no longer reset the heartbeat, so the thin client heartbeat will keep increasing. When it's greater than a timeout, which in this case here, sorry, the time here should be 1. So the heartbeat is increasing every second here. If it keeps increasing and reaches a timeout, which in this case is 10 seconds, then it resets the status, indicating to the server that that particular ID is not taken. And you can do those 2 lines for each one of the thin client IDs. For the thin client index 2, 3, 4, 5, you can do in Excel, copy there and paste here to do it faster. But you do for each one of the thin clients, and you have a algorithm, a method to check if the thin clients are connected or not. In the InduSoft website, I'm not going to create the GUI here just to save time and go through other questions. But if you go to the InduSoft website, indusoft.com, under products and downloads, sample applications, there is an application built many years ago called, I think, Web Control or Web Thin Client Control. And this example application does exactly what we demonstrated here. You can open many thin clients, and in the server there is a screen which indicates which thin clients are open, what is the username logged on each thin client, for how long that thin client is connected, and so on and so forth. Just for reference, in our roadmap, we have a plan to create a built-in native manager to provide this kind of interface, but following these methods, we can do it in the current version by application. And after you do it once, this is a kind of generic script. You can reapply it to as many projects as you want. Another question is a method to capture a signature and apply it to a doc. Also, an interesting question, and I've seen some customers doing that. If I'm not mistaken, they use, and the way to do that is an external ActiveX control or .NET control. If I'm not mistaken, there is a company called topazsystems.com, and they provide ActiveX controls to capture signature in an external touchpad or even on the screen. And if you decide to use their solution or the solution from any other vendor that provides an ActiveX control to capture a signature, then you can just host this ActiveX control in the InduSoft Web Studio and call the property, the methods, use the properties and events from the ActiveX control to interface, to interact this ActiveX control with InduSoft Web Studio. So even though it's not a native tool in InduSoft to capture the written signature, you can use an external ActiveX control or .NET control to do that. What we do have in InduSoft as a built-in feature is what we call electronic signature. So when the user interacts with the application, like execute a command, change a set point, things like that, you have the option to enable what is called e-signature, electronic signature. And what happens is, before executing this action, InduSoft Web Studio pops up a message asking for the username and password. And this action will be executed only if the user provides a valid username and password. And when I say valid, is a username and password for a user in a group that is contained in this security level here for this command. So if I say here security level 10 and I enable electronic signature, during the runtime, when the operator clicks on this button, he needs to enter a username and password. The InduSoft launches a dialog with asking for username and password, and this user needs to be configured in a group whose range has the number 10 in it. So for instance, a group from 0 to 255 would be able to execute this command. A group from 0 to 100 would be able to execute this command. A group from 0 to 5 would not be able to execute this command. And if the command is executed, you can use the function send event to send a message to the event logger, like for instance, the valve was open, for example. And this message here will be automatically sent to the event logger as long as you come here to the event logger and enable the custom messages. And InduSoft will automatically save the message, the timestamp, the computer name, and more importantly, the username that clicked on the button, which is considered an electronic signature. And we can save this information into a binary encrypted file if you select here in Project, Options, Format Binary, or we can save into an external SQL relational database. And you can protect this database with username and passwords to make it compliant with the FDA CFR 2021 Part 11, for example. Another question here is AL tag and AL tag value in alarm history table. Can they be exposed as points in the InduSoft Studio? OPC.2. I'm trying to bring those points to OZPy. Not sure what you mean for AL tag and AL tag value, but if you have tags here in the alarm worksheet, like here in the tag name and even in the message, you can have tags between curly braces. You can configure in alarm groups all the tags. In all those tags, any tag in the application is automatically available for a remote OPC client as long as you set the InduSoft OPC server to run automatically. So if I come here to an OPC client, in this case I'm going to use the InduSoft OPC client itself, but it could be an external OPC client. Select the InduSoft OPC server and browse for the tags. I see all the tags in my application available to the OPC client. Now, if you want to expose properties from those tags, and any InduSoft tag has several properties called tag fields, like the limits for the alarms and things like that, what you can do is define a script and create additional tags to be exposed to an OPC client through the OPC server. Like, for instance, let's call my tag A, and this my tag A can have the value of the tag. Let's say one tag I use here, wind turbine, for example, could have wind turbine 1, for instance, high limit, which is the limit of the high alarm associated with the tag wind turbine 1. So you can run this script continuously, and now this tag can be exposed to an OPC client with the high limit associated with the tag wind turbine. So to sum up, you can expose the values from any tags in InduSoft to an OPC, to an external OPC client using the native built-in OPC server from InduSoft. And if you want to expose the tag fields, the tag properties, high limit, high, low limit, low, high limit, EC, quality, timestamp, whatsoever, you can have a script that writes those values to individual tags, and those tags can be exposed to an OPC client through the OPC server from InduSoft. Good, some good feedback here. Another question is, I'm building a timer script for the new hour meter symbol I found in the App Store. I need to trigger the updating script every second. Is it better to use the scheduler task with a change event, or the second trigger and use runVB script to call a sub in global procedure, or set a Boolean tag that's tested for the and reset in the script task? Why? Is change or clock better? It's a long question, but a good one, and it's a common question. Like in many other situations, there are different ways to accomplish the same scenario here, the same goal. And in this case, as far as understood, the goal is to run a script in global procedure every second. So let's go here to global procedures. We can go to an existing one, the main procedures, for example. Can come here and create a new function. For instance, a function myTest in function. And in this function, you can have whatever interface you want, like x plus 1. In this case, I use less function, but just to demonstrate the architecture. Now, if you want to run this function every second, there are different ways to do that, but just to show some examples, one way would be to use event clock. Here in time, define 1 second. And here in expression, for instance, one example that was defined here, that was written in the question, is to use the built-in function run VB script and define the name of the function, like myTest, for example. Right? It does work. This function will be executed every second. The reason I do not recommend to use the run VB script, especially on the schedule, is because if you do that, the entire schedule thread stops, executes the function, and only after the function is executed, it comes back to the next line in the schedule. So since the schedule is a task that usually you want to run extremely fast, you have events that you want to trigger every second, every 100 milliseconds, you want to run it very fast, my recommendation is not to do something like that. Never call a function directly from the schedule. Of course, if it is a function that you know that's extremely fast, does not do much, you could, it works, you could run it from the schedule. But as a best practice, my recommendation is in the schedule, you do not execute external procedures because today it's a fast function. Tomorrow, you might want to add things to it, and it may not be as fast. The function could be more sophisticated, more complex, and could take more time. So the way I recommend to do is in the schedule, you just trigger actions, which means set a tag, for instance, my bool with the value 1, and then go to a script. In this script, you have here my bool, so only when this tag is 1, this script runs. You make here my bool equals to 0, so you execute just once per second. And here you have the call myTest or whatever function you want to call. Right? By the way, just a side note, in this, for each script worksheet, the execution is tested for each one of the worksheets one by one. And if the execution is true, the entire script in this worksheet is executed no matter what happens with the execution field during the execution of this worksheet. So it doesn't matter if I reset my bool here or there after the function, doesn't matter. The function myTest will be executed at least once when the tag myBool receives the value 1 from the schedule. So the first part of the question is, should I use the function run VB script from the schedule or set a tag and execute this function somewhere else? My recommendation is, as much as possible in the schedule, you do not do anything else other than setting tags. Very simple expressions, very fast actions that take literally less than 1 millisecond. And then, based on those tags, you can use other tasks like the script task to execute that function. And if that function is a function that really takes a long time, like queries a lot of data from the database, generates a report with thousands or millions of rows, and could take several seconds or even minutes, it's not a good idea to run directly from the script here, because you will not stop the schedule, but you will stop the script task while this function is being executed. So InduSoft provides another function called run global procedure asynchronously, where you can define here the name of the function in the arguments, if any. And when you call this function, InduSoft creates a new thread on the fly and executes this function on this other thread and does not hang the script waiting for the function to be executed. So if you have functions that take a very long time to be executed, this function is a good way to trigger them from a script and not hang the script for a long period of time. But keep in mind that this function will be executed asynchronously. So if you have something else here in the next row of the script, this row will be executed even before the execution of my test is finished. Another portion of the question is if we should use clock with 1 second or change with the tag seconds in trigger. Which one of the two methods are better? From the performance point of view, it's about the same. It's, I would say, exactly the same. There are advantages and disadvantages of each one, but I would say for seconds kind of doesn't matter. The main difference here is that this trigger will be synchronized with the Windows clock, with the local clock from your computer, and this one will not have any synchronization with your Windows clock. This action will happen every second, but not necessarily every time that the second from your Windows clock changes. It's not synchronized. The clock is not synchronized with the Windows time, while the second tag is synchronized with the Windows time. When it comes to seconds, typically it doesn't matter, but when it comes, for instance, to minutes, or especially hours, sometimes if you want something to execute every hour, but you want to be 1 p.m., 2 p.m., 3 p.m., 4 p.m., then you should use change hour. But if you want to execute every hour, doesn't matter if it is 1:30, 2:30, 3:30, or 1:15, 2:15, 3:15, then you could use clock. Back to the specific question, which was seconds. Assuming that synchronizing the action with the Windows time is not a requirement, personally, I prefer the clock because in the future, if you want to change this time base, you can easily come here and change from 1 to 3 seconds, for example. And if you want to do that with the trigger, you would need to create another tag and make that tag change of value every 3 seconds, and then have your my bool changing every 3 seconds. So to sum up the answer, number 1, avoid calling procedures directly from the schedule. Number 2, if you want to synchronize a time action with the Windows clock, use change with second, minute, hour, day, whatever system tags you need. If you do not need to synchronize it with the Windows clock, I would recommend to use clock with a time in the time column. Another question, well, thank you. It's thank you. What is the least cost alternative to provide my customer with a second monitor that always shows just one of the screens that are available on the main monitor? If I use a PC, it must be an industrial PC, driving up the cost of the thin client. Will the thin run on a Raspberry Pi or any other non-PC proc? First of all, from the software point of view, you apparently already know the solution. The most cost-efficient solution would be to use a thin client. Typically, in this kind of scenario, a secure viewer thin client, which would be running on the second monitor. In any runtime license for InduSoft supports by default one web thin client, one SMA thin client, and one secure viewer thin client concurrently connected to the server. So there is no additional software cost to have one additional display showing another screen. Now there are two ways to use this secure viewer thin client. Let's say that you have one PC where you have InduSoft Web Studio, and in this PC you connect two monitors. So you have monitor number 1 and monitor number 2. You could run on the same PC, on the same CPU, InduSoft Web Studio with the local viewer, plus the secure viewer thin client on the same CPU, and use the built-in function set viewer pause on the graphic script of the secure viewer. So in the secure viewer, you can check if server equals to if server is equal to 0, then set viewer pause and set the viewer for the secure viewer thin client on the second monitor. Configure Windows to use the second monitor as an extension in extended mode, so as an extension of the desktop. So the local viewer would run on monitor 1, and the secure viewer thin client would run on monitor 2. This is probably the least costly solution, because you just need one PC, one CPU, and the second one, actually both of them are just dummy monitors. But obviously, you need a computer that supports two monitors connected to the CPU, and the distance between those monitors and the PC, especially the monitor 2, which is the thin client, cannot be prohibitive to have this connection. If the monitor 2 is too far away and you need a TCP/IP connection with the server PC, then you come to our more traditional solution, where you have a PC with InduSoft Web Studio and a local monitor, and you have a second PC. So this is another architecture here. And a second PC, which is just the secure viewer thin client with the second monitor. And between those two PCs, you have a TCP/IP link, usually a Ethernet or Wi-Fi, but a TCP/IP link between those two PCs. Now back to the question, what's the most cost-efficient way to have this second PC here? To use a secure viewer thin client, you do need a platform that runs Windows. Could be anything from Windows CE to Windows Embedded to Windows 7, XP, Windows 8, 2003, 2008 Server. So on the very low end, we are talking about Windows Embedded or even Windows CE. Windows CE can be a secure viewer thin client from a regular PC running InduSoft Web Studio, as long as you do not use features that are not supported on Windows CE. For example, ActiveX controls or .NET controls that are not available, ActiveX controls that are not compiled for Windows CE, or .NET controls, for example. So on the low end here, you would need a device that runs Windows. There are emulators for Windows on Raspberry Pi, but quite honestly, I do not recommend it at all. It's not officially supported, and I've heard really bad reviews regarding performance, regardless of InduSoft Web Studio running Windows on Raspberry Pi. But an embedded Windows CE device or embedded Windows embedded device would be still a very usually an affordable solution for a thin client. Or if you can avoid the second PC altogether using just a monitor, it is possible as well. Very well. Another question is how to display the Excel file in the soft screen. So in Excel, at the end of the day, supports ADO connections, ODBC or OLEDB. So you can use the InduSoft database interface to display data from an Excel file in InduSoft. Just to run a quick example here, we can create a table here with columns like C1, C2, C3. You can give whatever names you want for the columns, and values like 1, 2, 3, 10, 20, 30, 100, 200, 300. The name of this table, let's keep sheet 1. And I'm going to save this one as my Excel, let's use XLS file, which is what the question was about. Okay, so I have this Excel file here. Now in InduSoft, I'm going to create a new project, for instance, ExcelDB. Very well. And here in InduSoft, I can create a link with that Excel file. So I come to Project, Options, Default Database. The provider for Excel is the JET provider. It's used for MDB files, for Access, and for Excel as well. Now the trick here is, number one, when you browse for the file, select for all the extensions, because by default it shows only the MDB files. Then you can select, in this case, my Excel here. And here in all, you go to Extended Properties, and for XLS files, you write Excel space 8.0. Say OK, OK, OK. Now on the screen, you can create a standard grid control. In this grid control, you select the data source as database, select the table that you want. In this case, is sheet 1. Have to make sure it's between square brackets. And you define the fields you want to see, like C1, C2, C3. Very well. We save as the main screen. We run it. So there you go. During the runtime, InduSoft connects to Excel, brings the data, and shows the data on the screen. So this would be one method to read data from Excel and display it in the InduSoft Web Studio screen. You can also use the database functions and manipulate data on Excel. Just a side note, even though Excel supports ADO, ODB, we can interface with Excel using SQL. Excel was not designed to be a repository database like SQL Server, Oracle, and other databases. So it is okay to use Excel for configuration, for small data sets, but if you want a historian, if you want to keep history data for a long period of time, I strongly recommend using Microsoft SQL Server or Oracle, Sybase, MySQL, all those databases that are fully supported by InduSoft Web Studio instead of Excel, which will not handle a lot of data very well. It was not designed for that. It does not have the capacity for millions and millions of records, which you might need in a long-term history. Other question is Web Studio with iPhone and mobile devices. InduSoft has for quite some time one solution called SMA, Studio Mobile Access. In order to configure the InduSoft Web Studio SMA, you just need to have the Microsoft IIS, Internet Information Services, so the Microsoft Web Server installed in your computer with support for ActiveX. You just need to install InduSoft Web Studio, and then you come here to Graphics, Thin Clients, Mobile Access, and it will provide you with an interface where you can define what we call areas here in the tree view, and you can add new areas and sub-areas, and for each area you define alarms, groups of alarms, for the alarms that should be displayed on each one of those areas, and you should define here the list of tags that you want to display, my tag, whatever it is, the label, if you want to show on the trains, if it should be read and write, and if you want to display with any one of those widgets on the browser. And in this case, any device with a web browser that supports HTML5 will be able to visualize the tag values, the alarms, and the trained information. For instance, if you go to InduSoft.com, under Products and Downloads, Demos, Mobile Access, we have configured an application running on the cloud, and if you come here to View Demo from your iPhone, iPad, Android, any device with a browser that supports HTML5. By the way, I'm even going to use the Chrome browser to show that does not need to be Internet Explorer. So InduSoft.com, Demos, Mobile Access. I'm going to here View Demo, username guest, password InduSoft. It will access the server, show the information on the screen. If I go to alarms, I see the summary of alarms from the alarm groups assigned to the main area. If I go to process values, I see all the tags assigned for this area with the widgets assigned to each tag. The ones with the blue background allows you to click on the icon and change the value and write the value back to the server. And if you come here to trained, you have the trending values for the pens, online data, or history data. So this solution is readily available, has been available in the market for several months or years now, and we have many customers using it. And just kind of announcement, in a few months, InduSoft is going to be releasing a new version of the product, which will allow you to create native screens in the standard screen editor from InduSoft Web Studio and visualize those screens from any browser that supports HTML5. In this version coming up in a couple of months, it's going to be pretty much, it will support shapes and animations. There will be limitations in regards to scripting and data objects yet, but eventually the idea is that the complete graphical interface will be available for any device on any platform with a web browser that supports HTML5. Another question, I would like to see display fields that I can change the tag address during runtime. In other words, I would like the customer to start the project and declare if the tag is in a Modbus or Ethernet IP tag, and then enter the IP address and tag name or address in a pop-up field. Trying to develop a simple heads-up display that is configurable at runtime. For the sake of time, we are already ahead of the time here. I will not show how to do that, but I will tell you how to do that. Pretty much each driver file, each driver worksheet can be configured as a text file. In case of the drivers, for instance, your question was about Modbus. When you create Modbus and you create here a Modbus worksheet, let's create here, insert a Modbus worksheet, Modbus 1, for example. Very well. There are two files that matter here. If I go to the applications directory, and I go to the config folder, there is this multcp001.drv, which is the actual driver worksheet. And if you want to change any of those settings here, there is another file called multcp.tfc. The good news is you can create those two files as text files, so you can use InduSoft functions like file write to build those files on the fly. And the syntax for those files is available in a document, available in the InduSoft DVD. Let's come here to the InduSoft DVD. Take the new one, Documents. Under Documents, in Tech Notes, you have this document called InduSoft CNF files. And here, in the item 8, you have the syntax for the driver files. So pretty much simple text files. And it shows here, in the first row is the description of the worksheet. In the second row is the name of the driver, and so on and so forth. So you can create this driver file on the fly, and then you can use the function end task driver in the name of the driver or just driver if you prefer, to stop the driver task, and then the function start task driver to restart the driver with the new configuration file. Another question is, what's the best method to group an ActiveX object with other objects? If you want to group, for instance, to reuse it or to be able to move around with other objects on the same screen, the best way is to group this object with other objects is to create a linked symbol with the ActiveX control in the other objects that should be, in quotes, grouped with it. What is the ABCIP? Why is the ABCIP standard driver sheet limited to some undefinable quantity when the main driver sheet is able to dynamically create a set of data groups? Not sure what to define, what you call a undefinable quantity, but the ABCIP, at least older versions of the ABCIP, communicated using a method which was pretty much the tag names. So in the messages sent and received from the driver, we sent the tag names and we received the tag names. And the maximum block size in the protocol, the maximal size in bytes supported by the Ethernet IP CIP protocol for control logics limits how many bytes I can send and receive in a communication request. So if I try to communicate a tag that has a very long name with many characters, when I transfer the name of this tag, it takes a lot of bytes. In other words, if I try to communicate tags with long names, each communication block will have less tags than if I use tag names with really short names, because I do not spend a lot of bytes to send short names to the PLC. Now, the most recent version of the ABCIP available to download from the InduSoft website supports a new mode which does not use tag names to communicate. You can configure the ABCIP driver to use index IDs to communicate with the PLCs. So when the driver runs, it pretty much either uses cache information from the previous communication or goes to the PLC, reads the ID number associated to each tag name, and from this point on communicates using the IDs of the tag names, not the tag names themselves. So the performance is considerably high, and you will not have this perception that the communication is highly dependent on the name of the tags. Another question, how can I know which users are connected to the thin clients? We talked about that at the beginning. Let's see a few other questions here. How do you send usernames to the PLC based on process known by which screen is open? Keeping in mind that multiple users can have this screen open on any one of multiple secure viewers. I think it's about the method that we discussed previously, the same kind of method with the array in the server as a server tag and a local tag on each secure viewer. And in the graphics script of the secure viewer, you define what would be the ID, in other words, the array position for that secure viewer, and then populate that array position from the server tag with the local values from that secure viewer. And then you can link this array to the PLC. Another question is there a way to search for an item in global procedures? You can search for any string in any InduSoft script interface using the command Ctrl+F. So if I type here, open the global procedures, and I type Ctrl+F to find, and type, for instance, GL, it finds here everywhere where GL was written. Other way, if you want to look specifically for tags or let's say InduSoft built-in tags, you can use the cross-reference. You just type here the name of the tag and cross-reference, and it shows you where this tag was used. And if it was in a global procedure, it will show here the name of the global procedure in the line where the tag was used. Is there a way to prompt for a user with higher level security on a button where the user does not need to log in and log out again? To log in and log out again, I think if I understood the question, let me just enable here the security system. What you are asking about is this option here, log on e-signature. If you do not check this checkbox and you enable the e-signature in a button, we would ask for the username and password to execute that action, execute the action, but we do not change the user logged on the application. If you check this checkbox, every time that you execute a command that requires e-signature, we log the user typed in the e-signature. And for the e-signature, if you come here to the group settings, you have what's called e-signature timeout, let's say 5 minutes, which means that if someone executed a e-signature now, within the next 5 minutes, the same person does not have to type the username and password again. He or she has to type the password only, which is one of the specific requirements or guidelines for the FDA 21 CFR Part 11 applications. Let's see how to open and close screens at each client and server. For example, server open screen 1, client open screen 2, client 2 open screen 3. and when tag name change, the tag 2 will open screen 4, and so on and so forth. Again, it's the same concept of local tags and server tags, keeping in mind that the graphics script is executed individually on each thin client. So I believe I have an example here. Let's see. Multiple monitors. So stop this project, yes. Okay. So here in the startup script, this is an application for 3 different secure viewers in 3 different monitors, and in each monitor, the customer wanted to open a different screen, in this case, a different group of screens. So I created this array called Secure Viewer Startup Screen 1, 2, and 3. So in the monitor 1, I want to show the screen group A. In the second one, the screen group B. In the third one, the screen group C. And you can use the method we discussed before to define a local tag with the ID for the secure viewer. And based on this ID, you open the screen SV startup script index ID. In this particular case, it's a little bit more automatic. What I do is on start, I increment this monitor counter. I set this local tag secure viewer ID with the value of the monitor counter. So each secure viewer that launches increments this monitor counter. I set the viewer position according to the ID of the computer, and I start the screen, startup screen, and the index is the local tag for that particular thin client. So the thin client 1 will open the screen with the name written in the tag Secure Viewer Startup Screen 1. The second secure viewer will open the screen written in the tag Secure Viewer Startup Screen 2, and so on and so forth. Okay. I think last question, is there a way to increase the open screen speed when add a bitmap big file as a screen background picture? Yes, there are different ways to do that. The first one is I strongly recommend not to use BMPs. Use JPEGs if you are on Windows CE, or even better, PNGs. Just save the screen as a PNG instead of BMP if you are in a regular PC platform. So if you go here to screen attributes, enable backgrounds, instead of using BMP, which is pretty much a very not efficient file, the files typically get really big, use PNG for PC platforms or JPEG for Windows CE platforms. And another way to speed it up, especially on the web thin clients, is to go to Projects, Web, and enable the file compression. If you enable this option and run Verify application, all the background pictures will be compressed the same way as when you zip a file. So the files will be smaller and therefore will take less time to be downloaded from the server to the thin client. Obviously, there is a trade-off there because the thin client spends more time than to decompress the files before showing them. So if you have a very slow network in a fast PC, it's recommended to check this checkbox. But if you have a fast network and a slow PC thin client, sometimes it's better to leave it unchecked. In the web thin client application, is it possible to use other ports than the 80? Yes, in the web server, you can configure whatever ports you want to use in your web server. It's really a web server configuration. And in InduSoft, if you use the InduSoft Web Tunneling Gateway, you can come here to Web Advanced and configure a port different from the port 80 for your web server. And each web server, IIS, and different web servers provide different GUIs, different interfaces for you to assign a different port to it. And with that, I think we covered all the questions, and I apologize, we're way beyond the time here. But I do appreciate your attendance to the webinar. Thank you very much for taking the time for the webinar. We have here some contact information for InduSoft, but you can find this information on the InduSoft website as well. So once again, thank you so much for your time. I hope the webinar was useful for you. And if you have further questions, please do not hesitate